Welcome, Sue Whitcombe. Is it Whitcombe or Whitcombe?
Say it how you feel. I never
Whitcombe.
know. Even as a child, I thought Whitcombe. I say, I think, yeah.
Yeah, it's good to see you. So, we met at the British Psychological Society conference on men's issues.
Yeah, the
male psychology. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's correct. And we've been looking forward to having a chat since then.
Yeah.
And you're a wealth of knowledge and experience in some of the areas that I'm most fascinated in, and my client group, which is separated parents and often separated fathers. And as a separated father, that's been part of my journey as well. So I'm interested in all of that stuff. Just talk us through a little bit about your training and your experience and your work.
Okay, so I came to psychology quite late in life. My first degree was in sort of engineering and management, and I worked in manufacturing industry for a few years. More because it was, how do you know at the age of 18 what do you want to do? And I was that sort of rebellious teenager. So if somebody tells you, well, you'll make a good teacher, which they did, my first thought was, there's no way I'm going to go into teaching then.
Yeah.
So I sort of fought against that. And went and did this degree at Bradford in industrial technology and management, which to be fair, I failed. I was lucky to have to resit my final year. Again, I wasn't at the right stage to knuckle down and get on with work. I had a lot going on. And having gone through therapy, I realised what the issues were at the time, and it was to do with some childhood abuse I'd experienced, and I can understand that now, but there was no way I was ready to learn or know what I wanted in life at the age of 18, 20, 24 maybe. I still wasn't there. I was very much square peg in a round hole. I didn't fit, but I kept trying to make myself fit. So I eventually moved out of engineering. I had family and I retrained as a teacher. And I found I didn't really fit there either. Not that I couldn't teach. My classroom management skills were appalling. I hated trying to teach a class. I saw everybody as an individual, and I was interested in their individual lives and individual stories and what their individual problems were, and I couldn't make that work. So I became a very good special needs teacher, working with individuals and small groups and doing advisory work and consultancy work. And that recognition that I was really interested in what barriers to learning people had, barriers to them coming to school, barriers to them engaging, how we failed them in education. And that's where I sort of moved sideways into psychology then.
Can I just jump in there? Maybe flag this up for later, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on the education system. Maybe we can unpack that a bit later, because
okay.
Yeah, carry on.
Yeah. So I became interested in psychology, and I thought I would go down the educational psychology route. Bit of noise outside. That's passive.
I can't really hear it actually.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's good. But I really, while I was studying psychology, I underwent my own therapy, I suppose, and how can I say, it transformed my life. And I know that sounds very cliched and it sounds very cheesy, but the fact is, it is true. And that is what I wanted then to share with as many people as I could be possible. So I went down the route of counselling psychology in the end, and did my doctorate, and I qualified when I was 51, I think. So it was quite late in life becoming into psychology. And during the time I was studying, I developed a friendship with a man who was separated, and his daughter. She was a similar age to my daughter. They got on well, and I became aware of very odd behaviours that I didn't really understand with her, what was going on with her. I just couldn't get a handle of it, and I wanted to understand what was going on for her. And this culminated in her rejecting her father totally. That's when I became aware of parental alienation. So it was while I was studying for my doctorate.
So this was almost a random personal connection. It wasn't to do with the work, your research, right?
No, absolutely not. And that's where my research came from, because I was so challenged by what I'd seen and observed and been part of, I think, that I hadn't understood. I really became aware that I had probably come across something similar before and not been aware then either. So I probably acted inappropriately as a teacher or as a therapist. I maybe colluded with some situations. And I think you feel a sense of maybe guilt, or, oh God, I've got this wrong before, because I was totally unaware of what was going on. And that's why I focused my research then on that area of parental alienation. And I've only ever, I suppose, as a therapist, as a psychologist, worked in the area of separated families and worked with families who have, where there's been conflict. Of course, I've worked in a general setting as well, but you keep seeing threads popping through there when young adolescents come to you and then they've got problems, and you look back and you're looking at the familial relationships. And I think it's that knowledge that, am I allowed to swear on your podcast?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Our childhood experiences and our family relationships, they certainly fuck us up, and that is it, isn't it? And we can label this however we want, but the fact is that is what happens, and it's recognizing that and dealing with that and grasping that. I think that is really really important.
Beautiful. And so you've become a acknowledged and well-respected expert in this field, haven't you? You've worked as an expert witness, and you work with families, and you teach. I think you train people as well.
So I started out working therapeutically, moved into doing some expert witness work as well in this area of family separation and difficulties with family separation when a child appears to be resistant to a relationship or refuses to see a parent. Or where a parent interferes with a child's relationship with the other parent. I do consultancy work with local authorities. I've done some training. I haven't done training for a year or two now, only because I've been, otherwise engaged, I suppose, but it's probably something I need to pick up again. I'm asked to do training quite often. It's just setting that time aside to do it. It's a good way to go.
So tell me, as far as I'm aware, I'm not following it super closely, but the domestic abuse bill, as I saw recently, has dropped parental alienation as a thing that really needs consideration. Is that right?
Yes. I have some difficulty with this. So in order to, when I found myself in that situation years ago, when I was trying to understand this behaviour of this child and the relationship with her father, what was going on, it didn't make sense to me until I came across the literature around parental alienation.
And is there much literature? Because some people say, it doesn't exist.
There's a lot of literature about parental alienation, just the same as there's a lot of literature about domestic abuse. Now, I'm going to lose a lot of friends by saying this. I think the biggest issue here is this binary divide that's happening. Is it domestic abuse? Is it parental alienation? Is it just perpetrators of domestic abuse who allege parental alienation? When I feel that the behaviours that we see in alienation are clearly coercive and controlling behaviours, and we're talking about the same thing often, I think, and how a child is used as a tool in that perpetration of often vengeful revenge, trying to hurt somebody else, control them. So I wasn't too disappointed that parental alienation was dropped from the domestic abuse bill, because I think it is already encapsulated
Right.
in coercive and controlling behaviours. Now, I know
Okay.
most of the people I work with would disagree with me on that, I think. I think in fighting for the label of parental alienation all the time, I think
we're missing the big picture.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's actually, yeah, I'm happy to hear that, because
because
that's encouraging.
I think the reality is, well, once you start doing, and I feel really privileged to be doing expert witness work, but once you start doing expert witness work, you see the things that you don't see as a therapist. When we're working therapeutically, we're working with somebody's subjective experience, and we hear what they say and we validate their experience. And at some stage along the line, we might start to challenge that with reality and that sort of process. When you're working as an expert witness work, you hear 2 or 3 very different stories coming at you from a mother, a father, and a child. But you also then have your triangulated evidence in terms of medical records, social care records, education records, police records, and you're able to build up a much more objective picture.
Yeah.
And with that objective evidence, if you like, I feel you're able to build a much clearer, much more accurate psychological picture of these individuals and their relationships and what's going on. And it's rarely a case of a perpetrator and a victim, or somebody attacking somebody else, or somebody trying to punish something else. It is often, from a child's eye, such a much more complex experience that they're experiencing. And the more we continue arguing about domestic abuse and parental alienation, it takes away from that child's experience.
Yeah.
What they are having to live with.
And, you know, I guess despite the problems with family court, it's supposed to be at least child-centric, isn't it? The child's interests are supposed to be the primary concern. It doesn't work out that way often, but...
Well, it doesn't, because what you always read is about one adult. To start with, the system begins with one adult taking another adult to court to see their child. But it's not about what does the child need. It's about, right, you've stopped me seeing a child. I have no option but to take you to court. So we've immediately got 2 adults in a battle against each other.
Yeah. How
is that child-centric at all? The child at that stage is not represented at all. They have no voice. It's a totally tits up system. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it makes some people a lot of money.
It does, yeah.
But having said that, I've met solicitors. I'm really impressed by some of the ethical ones that I've come across. So I definitely wouldn't want to, you know, write all lawyers off. But there's certainly, it's difficult to miss the fact that prolonging legal conflict between parents is a great way to drain the family of all their resources.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was talking to a judge, I think it was yesterday, and he was saying that in Denmark they have a system where they have really early resolution appointments with a psychologist working alongside a judge to try and solve the issues.
Oh, wow.
And I have heard about psychologists being used in that way in other jurisdictions as well, though I can't remember where. That's really annoying me.
But in maybe it'll come back to you. But, you know, my understanding is in France and other countries, they have, rather than an adversarial, they have an inquisitorial approach. So the judge will have powers to and resources to send the parents off to get family therapy or whatever the recommendations are from the expert witnesses.
Yeah.
So that facilitates a kind of drilling down to the root cause, rather than this narrative war which seems to happen in England. It's just not about anything.
And it is about it does encourage parents to bring their allies on board, to find that evidence, to get people to side with them, just to prove a point. And it takes away from the fact that, yes, some people behave in a despicable way and they may be harmful to their children, but the majority of parents are good enough parents.
Yeah.
And not battling about adult issues and losing sight of that fact that that child will benefit best if you just accept that they need both parents in their lives.
Yeah.
And I think we lose that all the time.
Yeah, I agree. And it'll be things around just red herrings often. Oh, the parent did this, and well, it's just endless, really, isn't it? It
then casts a really super microscope on the parental behaviours and what a parent does in a way that doesn't happen in normal family life.
Well, I was going to say, if you look at any...
then you're judged at a much higher level. How high is the
exactly.
that I have to jump over, which is totally unrealistic, because that doesn't happen in normal family life.
Yeah.
What is the point of that? To whose benefit is that?
Well, it starts to follow its own logic, doesn't it? So the Kafka's caseworker goes to do an observation of the non-resident parent, how he is with his kids, and finds that, you know, the place is a bit dirty, or he swears a bit, or he didn't strap the toddler into the pram or something. You know, it's like, but if you point that like microscope at any family, you're going to find all sorts of stuff.
Absolutely.
And it's a bit sketchy being a parent, isn't it? I mean, you
know.
It
is, it absolutely is. And can I handle my hearts? I do a lot of supervision as well. And I had a supervisor once who was commenting about noticing something in the background, because we're doing stuff on Zoom now.
Yeah.
I said, well, that's not right, is it? I said, well, isn't it right? You might be this type of person, and I might be some. But I'm telling you, if you had a Zoom camera on my house would be pretty messy around the background. This might be going on. You might see something inappropriate on my bookshelf that you thought was inappropriate.
Yeah.
But
all right.
But you need to take me as a whole, not pick up on those little things. And it's about us being a good enough parent, isn't it? Not a perfect.
Well, yeah, and we only need to get it right. What is it? 30% of the time or something? I can't remember
what that. It was a bit more than that, Zach. I thought it was about 80%.
No, it's not. It's really low. I was in a workshop once, and maybe it comes from Winnicott. I think he said it.
Right.
But as long as we make the repairs,
and that's what that is the other issue, isn't it? The way that the family court system works, the way that, and I was tweeting yesterday about the delays in the family court process.
It's going up, isn't it? So 47 weeks till final hearing or something.
Well, I think it's 15,000 cases have been in court for a year or more, and 3,500 cases have been in court for 2 years. Now, a lot of those children will not be seeing a parent. So where is that opportunity for that reparation? And I think that is the biggest problem for me.
Yeah.
The decisions that we make at the earliest hearings that say, right, we need to stop contact to sort out whatever's going on here. There is no opportunity for those early repairs, and that is fundamentally wrong.
So I think about this a lot. Why is that happening? Is it because the judges don't know about attachment theory? They don't know that they're commissioning a harm to a child by rupturing a key attachment?
Well, I also think that the social workers involved aren't really... They must know it. They must know it, but they're not...
Well, no, but they're put on fast tracks. I've got a friend I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I don't need to say what, I don't even know what the company is, but she's involved at a high level in recruiting people in and fast tracking them to become social workers. And she said the dropout rate is nuts because they burn out. They get blasted through this like accelerated training program, given a massive caseload at the other end, and then like half of them just burn out. So that's the context in which these people are ending up.
I think what's happened in social work is this erring on the side of caution, that worry that somebody might be causing harm, and so you need to stop contact in order to investigate that. Well, actually what you need to do is to provide safe contact while you do the investigation. Okay, not make a presumption that harm is occurring, because in presuming that harm is occurring, you're also denying the fact that this may be an allegation which has no validity, in which case severing contact is also causing harm. And there is very rarely a balancing of that in any, I've never seen a balancing of that.
Right.
In any report that I've seen is we need to stop contact while we investigate, but there's no risk analysis of what severing a good relationship might be doing to that child.
So
And we're not talking a short period of time anymore. We are talking 6 months, a year and a half, and that is so detrimental to a child and almost impossible to recover from, I would suggest. You know, we can patch it up afterwards, but you never get that time back. You never get that opportunity.
That affects the child's soul, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Can you just explain to our viewers why that is the case? Why is that so devastating to a child?
So I think the easiest way I can do this is to compare it to an intact family, if you like. Okay, so a normal development process is parents and kids fall out all the time. They do things that annoy each other, and you might shout at your child, and they might do something, and you might get it wrong, and you might go off in a huff, or your child might go off in a huff and sulk in their bedroom, and that's okay. But they know they've got to come down and sit down for dinner with you in 3 hours' time. And you have to repair that relationship. And that is how we grow into normal, healthy adults. We fall out with people, we learn to repair that, and then we move on. And we fall out again, and we repair it, and we move on. And that is an essential part of normal childhood development. In a separated family, when you are prevented from repairing any of those little ruptures, that normal development is arrested. It doesn't happen. And it's not that it's prevented for like a week or 2 weeks, it's prevented for long periods of time. Then a child will sit and will start ruminating about, oh dear, maybe I'm just not lovable because my parents not seeing me. Maybe there's something wrong with me, that I behaved in that awful way towards my parents. And maybe now they won't love me because I've said this to somebody and I can't sort of put it right. And the child will sit with these feelings over and over again and develop this huge sense of shame. That goes on.
Oh, sorry, Sue. It just cut out when you said shame. Sorry.
Yeah, the child will sit with that shame and that sense of failure and being unlovable and guilt. And the longer they sit with that, the more difficult it is then to go back to the parent and do that repair. And it doesn't just happen in separated families. We see these things in schools as well, when children fall out with their friends. And if they don't reconnect straight away or quite quickly, they just sit with all that stuff and it doesn't get better, and that plays away in their lives time and time again. So these are normal things which we're not treating in a normal way. We're putting artificial barriers in their way which stop and arrest normal development.
So what's the answer then? Because it doesn't seem, I haven't done doctoral research at any I haven't done particularly deep research in any of this, but my fairly straightforward training as a therapist, my understanding of attachment, it's not a controversial thing to say this stuff. It's like we've got 70 odd years of pretty solid research that we understand it well in animals as well.
Yeah.
It's like, so how can it be possible for this rupture to keep being done without an acknowledgement that it does actually have it's creating harm? And
I think, yeah, I think part of the issue has become the pile-on that social workers had against it for failing to intervene and act early enough and in serious cases, like recent cases like Star Hobson and Logan Mwangi and those sort of cases, and earlier cases like Victoria Columbier. So social
when the child ends up being killed, sort of thing. Yeah. Very low base rate.
Yeah, and I think that there is a sense that social workers must act. We must act to keep this child safe. So if there's any whiff of an allegation, they must take action to keep the child safe. And often what I see in local authority investigations about this is they treat a singular incident. So they'll treat a singular allegation and they will investigate that singular allegation without looking at the history of the case. So if there is allegation after allegation after allegation, and every time there is an allegation, that contact is stopped, okay, they don't consider that as a pattern of behaviour that might be harming the child, okay? So they're acting to protect a child without looking at how else can we protect this child. Now, what if this is a false allegation? What if this is one parent being very hyper-vigilant because of their own experiences in life? What if this is one parent acting as to take revenge on another parent, to punish another parent? Those are reasons why these allegations might come around. What can we do to keep a child safe and do that investigation? And we can and do in public law. There is a requirement for the local authority to ensure that those relationships are maintained, even while investigations are being undertaken. So if a child becomes subject to child protection procedures, or they're removed from a parent because they're concerned about that parent's behaviour, they have a requirement in public law to maintain that relationship.
So often they do better than the ones in private, don't they? Even though it's less serious.
Law, why on earth are we behaving differently when it's supposed to be less risk in private law? I would suggest. I disagree that it is. Why are we behaving differently in private law than we have in public law? Why are we not ensuring that those relationships are maintained in private law?
Because the local authority's on the hook in public law. And who's on the hook in private law? No one.
Nobody. Yeah. Nobody at all. Because the local authority aren't involved. Yeah. So my fantasy, if you like, is what is the point of private law, actually? Because if 70% of cases, 60 to 70% of cases have allegations of harm, which they do, allegations of domestic abuse or alienation or whatever, or child abuse, what are they doing in private law? Because we have a safeguarding authority who is the local authority. It's their responsibility to look after children and ensure that they're not experiencing harm. Why are we taking these cases through a private law system? Well,
it feels like there's no other way to get to see your child if your ex-partner won't do anything, maybe they just won't answer the phone or respond to emails. It could just be that they're stonewalling, you say. What do you do at that point?
But that is harmful in itself. Okay, so if a parent is preventing you from seeing a child, that is a harmful experience for that child. So who is responsible for dealing with children who are experiencing harm?
So is there a way to turn this on? Could this be a sort of class action sort of situation where if we could like formulate, hang on a minute, yeah, there is liability here, you know, like there's a statutory obligation of the local authority to protect a child from domestic abuse or some whatever, and it's being quietly fudged, isn't it? It's just
I would not air away. I would hesitate to say there's a class action here. I don't think that's within my competence to suggest that whatsoever. But I do think that we need to take the learning and knowledge from one area and place it in another. We know, social workers know that to fracture that attachment is detrimental to the child. They know it is important. Even if a parent is not a good parent, is not a good enough parent, is a parent who has caused harm, they know it is important for a child to maintain that relationship and keep it safe, okay? Because it is important in that child's development that they have an understanding of their parent, where they come from, what's happened to them, and to make sense of their life. Every social worker knows that. Every social worker who works in public law knows that. Yet it doesn't happen in private law. Why not?
Well, there's no penalty for false allegations of domestic abuse, is there?
No.
You cannot be held in contempt of court in family court. It's not a criminal court where you can.
Okay. I have seen cases where a parent is prosecuted for perverting the course of justice afterwards. In cases where allegations. It's not common, but I have seen cases for that. I don't know how I feel about that, but it does happen. And I think there's a problem there with false allegations. When we say false allegations, it brings up the same emotions as domestic abuse and parental alienation. It brings up that emotion of you're deliberately making false allegations. And that isn't always the case, and it isn't usually the case.
Right.
There's often a case of a child might come home with bumps and bruises, and a parent might be hypervigilant because of their own trauma history, and then not be able to communicate, and therefore they assume the worst, or they're not.
Well, it affects the framing of everything. Yeah, if the person is activated and they're in fight, flight, or freeze states for long periods of time because there's this ongoing conflict, then everything you see becomes either evidence or it becomes binary, like you said at the beginning. And we can do that. Humans are great at building stories and adding bits of information to them as they go along. So it might be done in good faith. That's probably not the right word, but
and I would say, in my experience in doing the expert witness work, the presence of deliberate malicious allegations is not great. I'm not saying they don't happen, they do happen, but more often than not, there's a misinterpretation, or there's the failures to communicate, or a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
I would also say that in my experience as an expert witness, I have rarely heard a child tell me that a parent has harmed them or hurt them in any particular way. Okay, it's normally that interpretation through a parent and through the parental lens of what's going on.
That's massive. So what I'm hearing is people are, more or less, generally speaking, people are good. They're doing their best. They don't get out of bed in the morning and say, right, I'm gonna try and be really nasty today and hurt my child. I think that is
absolutely true, and I think that's what's lost in this argument about domestic abuse versus parental alienation, is that parents, the majority of parents love their children dearly, want to protect their children, want to care for their children, and want the best for their children. Throwing them into a system which is not psychologically informed, which forces them to battle against each other and doesn't provide them with the help that is needed to parent when they separate from their partner, is not the way to go. Really. Yeah.
So how does your message tend to go down when you're doing, you said you work a bit with what, counsel, councils and
With local authority.
local authorities? Yeah. How do they receive this?
Normally quite well, actually. I think that what you often hear from local authority social workers, and this is the issue, if we put this through a private law system and a parent rings the local authority and says, I'm worried about my child, he's being harmed by the other parent, the message they get from the local authority is, well, you need to protect your child, it is your parental responsibility, so if you feel your child is being harmed, you need to exercise your parental responsibility. Are you telling me that I don't send them to contact? Well, no, that's your decision, but you have to act with parental responsibility. And the local authority then will sit on a fence and say, this is a contact issue, okay? Not an issue of harm to the child. So they will sort of give advice to a parent who will hear that and say, right, I have to stop contact. I've been told by the local authority I can stop contact, even though that isn't exactly what they've said. They've said you have to protect your child. They don't go to court to get an order to stop contact, they just stop contact, and that escalates the situation again. So local authority social workers will tell you, we don't know what to do with these contact issues, these private law cases. And they see them as something different because they're in private law, okay? Without then adapting, what would you do if this was a public law situation? What would you be doing in this situation? If there is a risk to this child, a parent is telling you there is a risk, do you not have a responsibility to do something about that? Why are you then telling that parent that is their responsibility to stop contact, which will breach a court order, okay? Or that is what the parent is taking from the conversation, even if you don't directly say it. You cannot divorce these, in my opinion. I think that is an artificial divide between what happens in public law and private law.
So what are you saying to these local authorities? What should they do in that situation? Is that...
well, I would say, you need to be maintaining conduct the same as you do in public law, and you need to be investigating this quickly.
That's a lot of, that's a lot of work that they've managed to dodge. So where's the incentive for them to go, oh yeah, let's... Well,
there's a reason that they have to dodge it, isn't there? Because we know they're underfunded, we know they're stretched, and we know that there are in their eyes, much more serious cases that they need to be working with, because these are the public law cases. A local authority social worker will tell you, please give me just a normal case where a parent has got a drug addiction, where a parent is, physically harming a child, where a parent
really nice, straightforward case. Yeah.
Because I know what to do with that.
Yeah.
I know what I need to do. I do not know what I need to do with these private law cases, which are supposedly the easier end, but are not.
Yeah. Okay, so but you work therapeutically with families as well. So maybe tell us a bit about what are the pathways at that point? Because as we know, we can spend years and tens of thousands of pounds getting backwards, if not even standing still in family law. It doesn't help the child often, and it creates poverty and job loss and debt and further PTSD often, chronic sort of traumatic stress, this ongoing extreme stress that just keeps getting regenerated.
In terms of therapeutic work, I think we have to be very, very clear at the outset. The later we are brought into these situations, the more difficult it is to provide a therapeutic solution, and we have to be really, really clear about that. I think the earlier we are brought in, the better the chance of making a difference. And the best way to work with these families, I think, is to work with them. People hear the term family therapy and they think, oh, you're going to make me sit in a room with them and I can't stand them. And that is not the type of family therapy that we do. What we will do is we will work with one parent, and we will work with another parent, and then we will work with the child, and then we will work with the dyads, and then we will move things on in that way. And there's
Just tell people what a dyad is. Does that
it's
just a group, everyone together?
Yeah, two people together.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it might involve the extended family, we might involve grandparents, or we might involve new partners, and it's necessary to be it's necessary to be aware of the complexity of family these days. I think that's really, really important. So quite often a child will have experienced 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different parent figures in their lives by the time that we start to work with them, because either parent might have had several relationships, there will be half siblings, there will be all of that. How complex is that for a child to make sense of these days? You know, how those people coming in and out of their lives and just being left with that. How does that make you feel?
I mean, just thinking about my childhood there, I fortunately, when my parents divorced, my dad remarried and has stayed married. So I had 3 new older stepsisters and then a younger half brother.
Yeah.
And that was a lot, you know, that was a lot to, I'm still working it out now, how that impacted me in terms of my relationship, how I felt. All these new people in between me and my dad.
Yes.
But thankfully that was stable and they're still in my life. But I can't imagine how it would feel if, you know, after a few years they broke up and then someone else came in who might have had a kid or 2 kids or whatever.
And that is incredibly common. It is incredibly common in the work that we do. And I think we really lose sight of what that is like for a child.
It's massive.
To develop a relationship with someone and then they're whipped away, and then you develop a relationship with somebody else and they're whipped away. Yeah. They're just totally lost in that. And how
what does that do? What does that sorry.
How do they dare attach to somebody else? How can they allow themselves to attach to somebody else or reattach to somebody if they're going to be whipped away again?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we see when contact is continually disrupted, that they develop that, you know, they have that relationship with a parent and then the things are going swimmingly and they're going great, and all of a sudden it's stopped again, and it might be a year or 2 years before they see that parent again, and they have to build that back up again. There is some immediate connection, but they still have to work at that and build it back up. And then what if it stopped again? And when do they reach the point when they think it's just too much for me to reconnect again because I'm only going to get, you know, hurt again? Yeah.
There's 2 things coming up. One is that just to observe it, it's not just the loss of the relationship with the primary with the parent, is it? It's the wider family. And that's actually really difficult often for grandparents as well. And other, you know, sibling, uncles and aunties.
It's siblings, aunties, uncles.
It's everyone. But the other thing is how do people, in your experience, end up finding their way to the appropriate support and services, like the kind of thing that they don't, do they? Like what? They don't. There's no incentive, or there's no signposting, or
there's no signposting. And I would say that there aren't many people who feel confident or comfortable enough in doing the work, because it
really doesn't the NHS train people in family systems and stuff like that, don't they? Right.
I have rarely seen any NHS service offer anything for separated families in this way, I would suggest.
Right. Unless they're really hardcore cases of public. When would a family be given? Because I've got friends, I should ask them this. You know, they're being they're having their training paid for, I guess, by a local authority or the NHS, and they're training in family systems. So when would they be deployed?
I think we often see family therapy, and again, through the local authority with public law. Okay. So often in public law, families are intact, okay, but disruptive or dysfunctional, or there is a single parent and the other parent is out of the picture. Whether they should be out of the picture or not is another thing. So I think you would often get that support put in by a local authority in that way. But I'm really struggling to think of anywhere where I've seen NHS get involved with separated parents and separated families in this sort of situation. Now, I've recommended, what typically happens is there is a push for individual therapy for the child or for a parent. And I don't get me wrong, I do recommend individual therapy as well, but I would really recommend that without some sort of overarching family work as well. Because at the end of the day, these families are in this situation because of individual issues that the parents have, typically something that's happened in their past, in their childhood, that is caused them or fed into the way that they behave in terms of relationships, and that needs sorting out. So there's this long-term work that needs to happen for that parent, but there's also the immediate work that this child needs now to be able to have a relationship with both of you, and that is such a time pressure on that. You can't get that back. It's an emergency now. It is an emergency. Yeah, it's a crisis situation. So yes, this is the idea. You need to sort your shit out, basically. You need to sort out whatever's going on for you. But the most important thing at the moment is that child needs to be having a relationship with you.
So what's your advice to a parent who really wants that and really agrees with you, but doesn't know how to get it? And maybe also, what's your advice to the parent who is frightened, who has the resident parents who's frightened about what will happen to their child when the child goes to the other parent and is? I think
there is a fear there, isn't there? There's a fear that there is that fear of abandonment and rejection by their child, I think, which is, I think, something a lot of separated parents feel. What if my child loves their other parent better? What if they develop a relationship with a step parent better? What if they reject me? And that is quite prevalent in those who've had difficult relationships in their own life with their own family and
now they've got total control. They've got the Oedipal mother complex, haven't they? That's their source of love. And and to all perspective, they feel they are the best parent in the world. They're doing the best they can. They care for their child and they nurture them and they keep them close, and that's really important. And there is a huge fear, I think, of that loss. I think there is something about normalizing for a parent of children have an immense capacity to love and have relationships with so many people, and that is how it should be. That is, how we're wired up to do that, and to not fear that. Not to say that it doesn't happen in some cases. It does happen. We have to deal with that as well. But the reality is it rarely happens. And I think there is a fear for some parents if they see their partner as abusive, and that is a difficult one, isn't it? Then, that parent will use the child as a weapon. Yeah. So when do you tend to get called in terms of therapy? Yeah.
Too late. These days it's called recommended therapy. I get called in much too late.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can do the work and sometimes you can't. And I have to be honest about that and say that I don't think I can. I don't think I've ever given a percentage chance of it being successful, because I don't think you can do that. But I have to be honest and say, this is what needs to happen and this is what I can do. But it's so late in the day, it might not work, and you have to accept that.
Yeah.
I think that's really difficult. It's not a nice piece of work for a therapist to do. I think what we want to do is help to make a difference, to make things better. And we can, and we do, and I know people who do good work, and I know I do some good work, but I'm always holding on to this, that this might not work. This might not work. Yeah.
And yes, I mean, some of the guys I'm working with, it's not just too late, it's already happened, and we're working in a place of what's really worth living for, is it, and reconstructing that, just trying to metabolize the loss and the grief, and envision what might be possible when the child gets to an adult, and how can I be okay, how can I generate that future, because that's in my power, but I don't have power to and I think do anything else.
I tend to do more of that work than the family work, because
right.
Well, I was going to say then that's the easier work, and that sounds terrible, isn't it? To help somebody come to terms with that loss, but it is easier as a therapist to do that than it is to work with this family so far down the line, who are so stuck in their ways and have such ingrained behaviors and ingrained emotions and feelings around that is more difficult to do. If you can tap into that cognitive side of a parent and do that psychoeducation where they recognize the damage that they are doing to their child, you have a better chance of success. So that means they're more emotionally stable, more emotionally secure parent. It's much easier to do in that sense. Yeah. But if that parent has such a trauma history that they cannot take on board that information, it is very difficult.
It might be too destabilizing for their personality structure to not see them.
I think that's an issue as well, that we say, right, you must go to therapy and do this. I think there's a lack of understanding in the legal system that we have, that you don't just do therapy and you cannot just, a lack of understanding about how you need to be ready to engage in that therapy, how traumatic going through therapy can be in the early stages, and how destabilizing it can be, and how you may legitimately choose not to want to go there at that moment in time because you know what's going to be uncovered and how difficult that is. So I think there's this misconception, isn't there, about what therapy is. I think, you just go there, you do this, you do a bit of CBT,
you get someone else to sort you out, and if they're good, they'll sort you out. And
it's just not the case. So no. So I think it's taking that on board as well from a judicial perspective. It's really difficult. And I think it's been clear in my reports to say, this is the ideal, that parent needs to do that work, but that will be really difficult. It'll be really challenging. They're in the middle of a pregnancy. They might not want to go there at this time or whatever. But actually, if they can park that and they can take on board also what is important for this child at this moment in time, do this bit of work. But it would be better if they could do that.
Yeah. And so does your expert witness stuff include risk assessment as well, looking at the static risk factors of what has this person done in the past?
If there's anything to do with criminal behaviour or abusive behaviour or harmful behaviour and a risk assessment is needed, I would recommend somebody else did that.
Okay.
It's not that I haven't got experience of doing that work. I don't feel that I've done it sufficiently to claim that I am the best person to be doing those assessments in proceedings, really. So my assessments these days are purely focused on the family. It's a family assessment. I no longer do individual assessments of parents or children. I say, if I'm asked to do in this type of case an assessment on a parent, I will say no, not really, because you need to look at the family. You cannot do it just by looking at one person, and that's not where my expertise is, really.
Yeah.
And I tend to, I suppose, like a lot of my colleagues, move away from that diagnostic framework. So we will often be asked, do they have a personality disorder? Do they have this? Do they have that? And I say, well, why do you want to know that? It doesn't matter if they have a personality disorder. What matters is how they are functioning, and can we get them to function better? It doesn't matter what label you want to give that or whatever. There are plenty of parents out there who have a personality disorder, and they're managing to raise their children. You know, it might be a good experience, a bad experience, but they still manage to raise their children. So the fact that they have or don't have major depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, personality disorder, that's not the question you want an answer to, really, is it? What you want to know is the way that they're functioning impacting on their ability to parent, and how can we rectify that, really?
Yeah. So given that, what is it, 50% of marriages fail, and
that's the ones that get married, is it?
Yeah, that's the ones that get married. What do you think's happening from a kind of systemic point of view in terms of our species, at least in the West? Maybe it's different in collectivist cultures, but we're in an individualistic, self-absorbed culture where everything seems to be breaking down and splitting and atomizing.
I think it's really interesting when you, I suppose, I've had these sort of conversations with my parents. My parents are still alive, and it's their 60th wedding anniversary this year.
Fantastic.
It is fantastic. But both of my sister and I are in separated relationships, and I know
with children.
She hasn't got children,
right.
But we found. And I know when I was feeling I wanted to separate, that those values my parents held stopped me from separating for quite a long time. I think that sense that you stick together for the children, that marriage or a relationship is there for the long term. There are ups and downs. You work through those ups and downs. It's not meant to be easy. You have responsibility. You have to this, that, and the other. And that really did stop me from separating. And I wonder if there is this almost growth in instant gratification, I suppose, or immediate gratification that we have now. This sense that we can have it all, and we can be happy, and we are entitled to be happy all the time, and we're entitled to this, that stops us working through things, and I don't know. I don't have the answers, Zach. It's
interesting to hear that your reflection.
Yeah,
and maybe
I think when I separated, I think I made the decision to leave a long time before I left. And in my head, I had this, again, idea that I'll stay here until my children are adults, and then I will leave. That's what I wanted to do. And there came a moment when I looked at us as a family, and I knew I was really, really low and depressed. I know he was really, really low and depressed. My son was low and depressed. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? Because this isn't right either. To stay here, and there's so many of us not
thriving,
wasn't right either. So but that was really difficult for me. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. And as my children move into their relationships, and a couple of them are married and the other one's in a stable relationship, and they've got children now, And you're just hoping you sit there just hoping things are going to be okay, that, you know. Yeah, it's really a difficult one.
Thank you. Really.
I don't know if that gets us anywhere, and I don't know what the answer is.
Well, we're in it together, aren't we? I think we're all in it collectively, because even those of us who have successful marriages, they're connected to people who don't, you know, might be their parents, might be their siblings. There's this is getting passed through the chain one way or the other, isn't it?
Yeah.
All this separation and unsafety, and it's we're holding it all together. And yeah,
I only have one friendship pair that's have stayed together, I think. And I think that's true. I mean, I'm not one to have loads of friends anyway, but every other relationship has broken down, and there's a remarriage or a new relationship. I can only think of one couple who has stayed together and have been together for what must be 40 years now, I think. But there is no one else that I know that has stayed together. And I wonder if I wonder if there's an evolutionary thing there as well, in that at one time we would have popped out a kid every year or two up until our late 40s, and then probably died in the next 10 years. Do you know what I mean? And relationships and being in a marriage had a much different purpose to what it is now. What is the purpose of a relationship? And I do a lot of genealogy, family history, and looking at family structures back then. You know, if a parent died early, there was always an immediate remarriage, because you had to have that contract with somebody. Because
it was survival. It
was. As a woman, you needed somebody to provide for your kids, and as a man, you needed somebody to look after your kids so you could provide for your kids. So there was that sort of contract that happened. And the very purpose of a relationship and marriage is very different today, I think. And our individual desires and needs in life are very
different. It's sort of pitched or framed as a potential vehicle for joy and happiness and fulfillment, but actually that's possible, but it's pretty difficult to achieve, isn't it?
I think there are very clear cultural differences there as well, aren't there, in terms of what relationships are for, and in terms of whether this is somebody you fall in love with. And
well, there is a connection to third wave feminism there, isn't it? Because I think it was in the 60s and 70s or 80s maybe, when women in America, I think it started mainly, they started divorcing their high-powered husbands because they weren't feeling fulfilled in the marriage. And so the husbands started getting confused, because they were like, hang on a minute, I thought I am doing my side of the deal, but the deal had changed, and maybe we're still in that. It's and on top of that, this confusion around what people are supposed to be doing. Men don't really know what's expected of them. They're trying to find their place, but they don't have a specific domain to access masculinity and feeling proud of that, whatever it was, providing, protecting.
But I think there's something there as well to do with society, and I suppose this was quite interesting for me with the death of the Queen. Actually, I was sat there with my mum and dad, and it brought up a lot for them about life and passing and people who have gone from their lives, and what life was like, you know, the changes that they've seen in their lives. And it comes back to that sort of genealogy stuff that I do as well, that if you did not provide for your families, and nobody else was going to provide for them anyway, there was no other option, you know, that there was no state benefit, there was nothing to rely on. That is what you had to do. If you were out of work, there was no food on the table. You know, there were no, you might have got help from the community in the sense that we have food banks now, I suppose, in that sort of way. But nobody was going to provide for your family. That was your duty. It wasn't a choice. It wasn't a privilege that you went out and you went down the coal mines, or that you went and worked on the railways or whatever. It wasn't a choice. You had to do that because there was no other option. You had to do that. And I think that has changed very differently. There are safety nets now, which mean that people can make different decisions. I think there was a decision to make where there was no decision, there was no choice before.
Yeah. And there's also something around, I don't know if you would agree with this, but the devaluing of the hearth, the home, the mother, that archetypal energy of the nurturing one who's at home, and because women are encouraged to go out and smash it in their profession, in their professional lives, which is great, but you can't do both. And if both parents are working and the child's at after school activities 5 days a week, which people are doing this, they're actually doing that to their children. What's the likelihood that child's going to go on to be able to make decent human connections and relationships? It's almost,
this is something I suppose I do struggle with it. So I took the decision to be a stay-at-home mum for quite a while that my children were at home, and I recognised I could do that because my partner at the time had a good income, which enabled us to do that. But I also recognise that I would be prepared to give up a lot in my life, a lot of those extras, a lot of what people consider as essentials nowadays, I think, to be able to stay at home with my children, because I felt that was the right thing to do. And there was a time when my partner wasn't particularly well, and there was a risk that he would lose his job, and that didn't faze me. I said, well, it doesn't matter. We don't need to live here. We don't need that. We don't need that. What do we actually need to provide for our children? And actually what our children need in terms of material things, and it's very little. What they need is us as parents. They need presence, our care, our presence. And I don't know if that's ever a very common experience now, of very common thought of mothers. And I think I don't know whether we've gone too far into what is important, and it has now become more material than presence. And I struggle with that one, I think.
It's bringing up a lot, this conversation. Thank you.
I'm not sure if that's good or bad. And I wonder if that's an idealistic point of view. Is it necessary nowadays for two people to work because the cost of living is so high, and it needs to be?
Well, there's these self-organizing collectives popping up everywhere. I was talking to it's not really a group, it's just it's a group of people who are having meetings near where I live in Cornwall, and they're trying to develop a way of working out a structure so they can buy some land and live on it together, but not in a particularly they're exploring it, and they're exploring the different legal structures. So these things are sprouting up, and there's more community vegetable gardening things going on, and I think people are starting to take their kids out of school more as well and homeschool them, because there's a sort of pervasive separation going on, and so families are separating, but also children are being socialized in this way that we think of as mainstream and normal now, but actually it's quite strange, isn't it? And I'm not sure how helpful it is.
I think what's popping into my head is what are our needs and what are our desires? So in terms of two parents working, is it a need for two parents to work, or is it a desire for two parents to work? Whether that's for their self-fulfillment, or whether that is to bring a better standard of living, or what? Or
do they can't bear each other?
Well, they can't bear being with their children 24/7.
Well, they can't bear being with their children. That. Yeah.
I do recognise that. So, albeit that I was a stay-at-home mum, there were times, and my kids will tell you, I used to pop up and stay in the travel lodge every now and then, but not on my own, because I couldn't bear being at home.
Yeah, they are annoying. Yeah. Yeah.
But there is something about normalising that as well, isn't there? Yeah,
it's totally normal.
Of course, it's bloody
I'm not sure. We're not really designed to just be with our children, are we? We're supposed to be. Well, we're not supposed to be, but we haven't evolved. We haven't had a chance to evolve beyond what we were doing a few thousand years ago. Pre-agricultural revolution. Even we don't change that quickly physiologically, and we were always in tribes. We were always sharing that load, weren't we? And there was mentoring, and and
I wonder if those tribes aren't there anymore with mobilization and people moving away from that. I know how dispersed my family is, and I think that started with my generation, in that my parents' generation were all quite close to each other. They lived reasonably close to each other.
I think that's right.
And if you look through history, it was families and extended families moved together to find work around the country. So the whole lot used to move together. It wasn't an individual who moved necessarily.
Yeah.
And how that sort of changed with my generation, with going away to I was the first in my family to go to university.
Yeah.
So that moving away to go to university and staying away to work and developing relationships away from
James Hillman talks about that in an interesting way. He talks about this shift that you're describing. It was, at one point, it was normal to just assume that I'm going to live and die here where I was born. And then it became quite a radical thing to say, oh, I'm actually just going to stay here now until I die. The assumption is, I'll stay here for a bit, see what it's like. And I can get all my service needs met by, it doesn't have to be people in this town or this village. Whereas before it was always like, oh, I need my roof fixing. Oh, it's John's the guy that does that. And everyone knows John because he's the guy that fixes the roof. And the compression of space as well with faster travel and telecommunications and now the internet. So everything's just we're in this sort of hyper warp speed thing that we don't really understand what the psychological implications are really. Maybe that's the point of this question, I think, that I asked earlier, is why is this happening? Well, it's our biological and emotional response to all this material stuff.
There was a friend of mine a few years back introduced me to, there was a series on BBC One, it was, I think you still might be able to get it, called The Century of Self, which is about consumerism and how we're persuaded about what we need in our life, not what we want, what we need. You need this, and all the psychological influence around that, and how psychology is used to say this is what you need in your life. And I certainly think there is something there about consumerism and that sense of things being important in your life, which
the deficit model of well-being. And it's from an egoic state, isn't it, that I need that to fix this. We're not stepping into the more kind of unconscious spiritual side of being, which is it's like you said earlier. Do you mind me talking a bit about mentioning your camper van?
No, please.
Yeah. Just you're practicing this in your own life. So you've got rid of your house and you're in a camper van, and I'm jealous. I'm really jealous of you, because I know how, in my experience, how free I felt when I was in a camper van, and that's different. Yeah, that sounds very extreme to some people, doesn't it? But it's amazing when you try it.
It's not. There's something there about having very little, that you need very little to really make you feel okay. That what makes you feel okay comes from inside. But there's also something very grounding in having to deal with your waste yourself. Stop taking things for granted, where your water comes from and how much water you're using. How you get rid of your when you go for a pee, how do you deal with that? And you have to sort that out yourself. You're not reliant on somebody else dealing with all this for you. You have to deal with that yourself. So that's really grounding as well.
I get that. I did a long walk through August, an old pilgrim trail called the Mary and Michael Way from Avebury down to Cornwall, and I was just in a bivvy bag, and so it was like that, but maybe even more. It was just, if I could get some cover, if I could get under a tree, a decent tree that had flat ground, I'd be really pleased. I'd just be like, wow, this is great.
In my sense, as if I get a level pitch for the night, not sliding out of bed.
And sometimes you can't, and you just have to be a bit uncomfortable. It's okay. And then even on the really bad nights when I couldn't really get a very good spot and the pub was closed, that I'd got to this village and I just couldn't really get anything I wanted, I'd just wake up the next day and all of that angst had just clear, and it was a fresh opportunity to meet my needs again. And it's really profound, very
I do feel that on a daily basis now. There is a sense for me almost daily that that hasn't been a great day, but tomorrow's another day. Tomorrow's another day. Let's see how it goes. And I really feel that these days.
That sounds like a good place to be.
And I honestly don't look too much further in the future than that. So for that reason, I don't take on any long-term work at the moment, because, and I think part of that's come out of having cancer as well, in the sense that I don't know if I will ever feel totally clear of that. I'm okay. There are no physical signs and no physical symptoms at the moment, but I've got stage 3 cancer. And so what does that mean for me? So I always have this slight anxiety there, and I don't feel able to commit to things long term, I think. But I'm quite comfortable with that. I quite like not committing to things long term, that I can commit to this window here in front of me, and you can see that space. And so I don't do long-term work anymore. I only take on short-term work anymore. And I only take on one project at a time, where I feel confident that I can see it through to the end, or reasonably confident. So it's been an adjustment for me to do that, but it's a place I'm quite comfortable with, I think.
I can see and hear that, and I imagine that's feeding into your holistic well-being no end. That contentment.
It is, but I am well aware that the family think I'm a bit of a nutter. So there you go. That's okay with me, really.
So I've really enjoyed this conversation, Sue. Thank you.
Good, me too.
Is there anything you want to share in terms of where people can find you or access your work or work with you or anything like that?
I suppose the easiest way to find me is on Twitter, I suppose, because I have been trying to sort my website out for the last 3 years and I haven't got it yet. So I'm on Twitter and I'm on LinkedIn, and I might get round to
What's your handle on Twitter?
At I think I'm Dr Sue 2014. Yeah, I am. That's Dr Sue 2014.
Okay, and what do you say? LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn as
Sue Whitcombe.
Yeah, Sue Whitcombe. Yeah, I do get back to people, but it might be a while before I get back to people.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sal. Thank you
Yeah,
very much. Cheers.
been a pleasure. Me too.
Cheers. Okay, bye.